Hola Florida! Introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light Beers. Enjoy responsibly.
Good evening, welcome to another edition of EduTV. Haven't been here in a while, now we're back. Had a lot of political stuff going on. And here one of my favorite people. Is it safe to say that, Diana?
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. With Diana Moore, she's a veteran teacher, and she always has a lot of things on her mind about teaching, the teaching profession, how to improve things. So let's get right to it. Before the show, we were talking about a teacher contract, right? Mm-hmm. So it's yes or no, and you call it what, bifurcated?
Ballot, yes.
Yeah, okay, tell us about that.
Well, first let me just say Happy American Education Week, because you know this is American Education Week. So anyone who's associated with education throughout the United States, we celebrate them and everything that they do.
Yes,
so
I celebrate
I think this is a good chance for us to start off by saying that. But I wanted to come today to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening with teacher evaluations.
Okay.
Because if you remember, we've had these conversations before, and there's been some changes that have happened since the last time we met and we did an interview. And one of those changes is a change in something that was bargained. And so for a little background for the public who may not know, there is always a union for most every single school district in the state of Florida that bargains on behalf of the employees. There's one for the teachers and one for our classified folks. And when we sit down at the table, many times a lot of the changes that we bargain are based on some of the laws that change in Tallahassee.
Right.
And so that's why when you said the election was going on, the people we send to Tallahassee make those changes in our laws. And one of the changes they made back in 2011 was that all teachers who are hired from 2011 on will only get a one-year contract. And so everybody has changed to somewhat of a temporary position. But the other thing that they changed was they now based...
Did you say all teachers?
All teachers hired after 2011 have an annual contract.
Wow.
So every year they hope to have their contract renewed for the following year.
Good old Republicans.
Okay. Well, and the second thing that changed was that all teachers are now evaluated on both a principal's say and their student learning growth. And so that score would be based on various tests. When they first rolled out the test, as you remember, we had FCAT. And for years we talked about FCAT and how valid was the FCAT test in third grade and some of the other grades. And we would get those test scores back. And there was a lot of debate as to whether it was the appropriate way to only test a child on one day with a score that determined whether they moved on to fourth grade or not. Right. And I think teachers agree with testing and they agree with evaluation and assessing where students are, but we didn't like the one-day method. We wanted multiple methods. And so a lot of discussion happened in Tallahassee, and the legislators came up with a new test called the FSA. And they added a slew of tests called end-of-course exams that a lot of our high school students take at the end of, say, ROTC or the old shop class, robotics. Mm-hmm. And those tests determine where a student would go for the next year. Some of them would determine if they would stay back, and some of those tests would determine if they would move on in their school years. And the question that the teachers were asking was, how can you determine our teaching ability on the one test? We wanted multiple measures. You've been a principal before.
Sure.
There are a lot of things that you can assess a teacher on, but those students felt a lot of pressure for these tests, and we saw that happening.
Right.
So once that changed, the percentage on how a teacher would be evaluated would fluctuate. It used to be 50% on what the principal observed and 50% on the student learning growth scores. Well, here's what happened in Orange County. That was changed to 67% of the principal's
Right.
portion and 33% of the student learning growth scores.
Right.
So that is what is now in place for 16-17. And that has been changed and
Do you
bargained.
think that's fair, or?
Well, it depends, and I guess as a former principal, you understand that there's still a lot of subjectivity when a principal comes to observe a teacher.
Right.
We've got many things that you can look for when you walk into the classroom, and if they choose to talk to you about 3 of those particular things, and you think maybe there were 3 others that you should have looked at, you can have a debate back and forth on those issues. But the model that was incorporated into Orange County Schools was based on Mr. Marzano's 10-year
yeah.
growth plan.
Oh, yeah.
So he wrote a 10-year growth plan for teachers to improve. Not to turn around overnight, but to look at how they were teaching and to improve. But then the legislators made this evaluation system and said we had to have it in place. So they really put this thing in place very quickly.
But not Marzano, whichever
No, Bob
one you adopted.
Marzano,
Right.
we don't blame Mr. Marzano. He had a great system, but the school system decided because of the law change they had to put something in place, and
Right.
that's where they turned the Marzano system into our evaluation system. And so basically teachers are now categorized into 4 categories. They're either listed as unsatisfactory, needs improvement, effective, or highly effective teachers. And so those are the 4 categories that are in place. When we bargained 3 years ago with these changes in the tests, we did bargain a contract that said we would hold teachers harmless for 3 years until they got the results of these tests in and looked at the validity of the tests. Now, while we were doing that bargaining, we were asking parents to make sure that they stepped forward and, quote, bargain for their children.
Right.
Because their children were still being held accountable for these tests that were being validated, et cetera.
Yeah.
So if the teachers got to hold harmless, we should certainly look at the students and where they would be. So we start off with this system. We've got needs improvement, effective and highly effective. And what Orange County showed the first year was that there were 80% highly effective teachers.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
80%.
And then the next year, it dropped to 2.4% highly effective teachers. But the problem was that
That would be a statistical anomaly.
Well, it would be, and since the average around the state was 37% in most counties, we had a very low number. But the problem came that the legislators, in their great wisdom, they rolled out a plan called the Best and the Brightest. And they thought any teacher that brought their ACT, SAT scores in and were above the 80% percentile could get an extra bonus of $10,000.
Now, I was torn on that one simply because I know a lot of teachers could have used that money. But the way you did it, right?
Okay, so
using that rule, yeah.
So there's your exact point. You had to have a highly effective to be able to apply. So in Orange County, there were less than 300 teachers that had a highly effective.
So, you had to have both of the things.
Right,
Okay.
to even be able to apply. So in Orange County, less than 300 could apply, and we looked at the statistics. Over 100 of those teachers that had the highly effective came out of the district office. They were district office personnel who
Wow.
didn't have a classroom. And so about 99, I think, if you look at the Department of Education website and look at that statistic. So we question the drop from 80% to 2.4%. So this...
That doesn't even make your district look good. To say
No,
that
it
you only
doesn't.
have
No, it
2%.
doesn't. And so what happened was, I guess a lot of teachers did apply. A lot of older teachers went back and found these scores. They submitted them. And by the time they spread out the money that the legislature had set aside, it wound up being about $8,000 that teachers received. That was extra money, and teachers loved that money.
Right.
Even though we're against that idea that
the
if you have an
methodology.
ACT
Right.
score that's over 80%, that makes you a great teacher. And this was the other problem. You had to have a highly effective if you had taught before and the 80%. But if you were a brand new teacher, you just had to have the score.
Oh, yeah.
So if you had no experience and you submit your ACT score, you could also get the $8,000. So those teachers who've been around for a long time and who think experience is a great teacher also looked at that and said, this doesn't look really fair. And I think most people would think that, as you gain experience as a teacher, that does help quite a bit in your...
But do you guys think you need to maybe, I don't know, strengthen your position up in Tallahassee? Because these people, they make these rules, but they're not asking teachers about, hey, what do you think of this rule?
Well, I think that's a good point, and I went and met with some Republican legislators and said, I want you to know that when you pass these laws, this is how they're implemented actually in the classroom, and I want you to know how people think about these, what people think about these things.
Do they care? I mean, do they listen
I
to
do
you?
think they care, but I don't think they know. For example, if you don't walk in the shoes of a nurse every day in a hospital, you don't really know some of the, intricate things that affect their job. And I think that's the same way our legislators are when it comes to making rules. Just because you went to school doesn't mean you're very good at making rules for teachers and schools for the future.
Yeah, they're kind of
Yeah.
making the rules in a vacuum.
Right.
Right, without
Right.
any expert professional teachers.
Right, and they really should have a committee of vocational teachers and high school teachers, middle and elementary. They're very, very different at the different levels.
Right.
And I think that's important. So,
Now, you're not anti-evaluation.
no, I'm not. We need to have an evaluation,
Right.
but we believe in having an evaluation that is up front as you get started, and that you know what the rules are when you get started, and the rules are in place at the end. When you change them in the middle and after a year, it's a little unusual. So,
But how can that be? I mean, don't people see this? I mean, if you can see it, don't. No, I'm just asking because it's just common sense. No, yes.
well,
Or are things done for political reasons? Because
Good question.
I was reading. You know what? I'm going to hold that one
All right.
because this is a juicy question on the other side about the distribution
okay,
of effective.
okay,
Don't dive into that yet.
all right, I won't.
But I want to know about it.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the informal observations. Do you have a problem with that? With the principal just kind of coming in and checking?
No, I think the district has actually started with coaching, and they advise principals to come through and coach, because the first time somebody comes in with an iPad
Right,
and
right.
just starts saying, I'm here to observe you, people kind of freeze up and they're a little bit nervous and they don't know what they're looking for. So there really needs to be a good plan to teach people the evaluation
Right. That's
system
right. That's right.
and make sure that they understand what's being looked at when they walk into their classroom. And that was really not put in place very well. It was very inconsistently implemented in our district.
Is that something that the teacher union should have proposed?
well-
I think because we had talked about that, like maybe, I don't know, some type of little prep, because they're just throwing you guys a bunch of stuff. You got to kind of learn it on your own, but you may know and you may not know. But whose responsibility is that to kind of?
The employer.
Okay.
The employer. And so what happens is, here's a manual, read it.
Yeah.
Go online and take this little video. We have some modules for you. And the problem is that if you're a brand new teacher, you have very little time
Right.
for your life as you are just getting incorporated into the profession. But there's not a lot of time for that. So they tend to do a lot of that training during the summer, but they don't bring people in during the summer. They've now incorporated modules for teachers to take during the summer and get paid for, and that was something
Okay.
we bargained to
Oh,
get
that's good.
professional development.
Okay.
They get $20 an hour for doing that, so
That's a good
that's an
thing.
improvement, and that's a good time to do that training, not while you're in the heat of the school year. So,
Right, yeah. And we talked about, well, I guess you just can't change that, the whole line item, the things that are good, to vote on those. Is that like a standard across the United States? I mean, what is behind that though? Because it just seems to me that if something's good in the contract, keep that, and then we'll take this thing out. I mean,
You know, it all comes down to politics and who you
Wow.
elect and who you elect for your school board members. And if you talk to your school board members and they prioritize certain things, then they will bargain certain things, and that's where it comes from.
can they do that? The school, do they have the power to change that?
When the school board is asked where they want to prioritize their money before they head into bargaining, they will prioritize their money. For example, I just had my custodian tell me that they're quitting and taking a job at ORMC
Okay.
because my custodian only works 29 hours a week and doesn't get health insurance.
They're playing games like that?
Yeah, and so we lost a very good employee who wants health insurance and is going to go to work for the hospital system. And I mean, I think just for an extra hour, somebody could get insurance. I think that's kind of a sad way of looking at things. But if the school board says, we want to make sure we're competitive in this service industry in Orlando.
You're looking at it from
They'll-
one standpoint.
they'll-
Okay,
they'll
hold that
prioritize
thought. Hey,
that.
folks, we'll be right back.
Okay.
Because I want to ask Diana about the distribution of effective and ineffective evaluation. This is going to be good. Don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.
Hola Florida! Introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light Beers. Enjoy responsibly.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her, and her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Okay, welcome back. All right, I'm here with Diana Moore, and she's very smart, very knowledgeable, okay? So we're talking about teacher evaluations, okay? So now, I was talking with a teacher earlier. Now, is this an urban myth, or is this something that's actually factual, that because of monetary reasons, if so many teachers get a certain score, they're gonna get bonuses, correct? Or they get additional pay. So is the amount of money dictating or possibly dictate an actual score? Like you can't have too many people who are highly effective because that would drain the budget or something? I'm asking.
Okay, that's a good question. So the raise for teachers last year was $500. And then the rating of effective would get you an additional $1,500. So actually it's a total of $1,500, $500 for your base and an additional $1,000. But if you got the highly effective score, that would result in another $1,350 for your performance. So
Plus the 1,500?
so that's $1,850, correct.
Okay.
So when you say if there are more teachers that are highly effective, does that have an impact on the district's budget? Yes, it does. So does that result in some subjectivity of the principals on their portion? It was 50%, now it's moved up to 67%. And the student learning growth scores are now 33%. So yes, there is. And now the beginning teacher's salary has moved from $39,000 to $39,500. So there's a question as to whether we're recruiting enough new teachers in Orange County, and there's a question about turnover in our county. How many teachers are leaving, whether they're retiring or taking jobs somewhere else, and leaving our school system, leaving a big...
Yeah, I did see something on
Yeah.
the news about a shortage of teachers. What, you guys normally, 200-300? Well, at that time, I think they were saying about, they needed about 200
I still think they
teachers.
need about another 100 that they still haven't filled the classrooms with,
Wow.
that they're still
So
using.
what happens in a case like that?
Well, they put substitutes in, and substitutes will be there, and a substitute gets paid $75 to $100 a day. So once they hit a 2-week mark, they jump to a higher level. So they also tend to move the substitutes around, so they don't have to pay them the $125 a day when
Man,
you're
that's a
there
lot of lost labor.
over 2 weeks. Yeah, it is. It is, and I think parents get concerned whenever they can't find teachers to stay in our school system. So it's a concern.
Now, on the teacher evaluations, right? Are they designed to help the teacher to become a better teacher, or do teachers feel as if they're designed to criticize me? I mean, how do you find that balance in that?
So this is my opinion. I think Mr. Marzano invented a growth model over 10 years so that teachers would assess and look at the way they were teaching and incorporate things into their pedagogy to get better. But it was a 10-year time period, not 1 year that we expect everybody to make all the changes. So I think the question you're asking me is, what does that principal see as their role as the instructional leader of the school when they come in and talk to a teacher about improving? Are the principals the true instructional leaders to be coming in and saying, you need to do this better, you need to do that better? Have they been trained on the Marzano system to be able to chunk that learning and help teachers truly grow? I think that's debatable school by school. I think you will find certain principals that really believe that they are in there helping their teachers grow, and I think you will go to certain schools and you will find that those principals are trying to do a turnover of some of our veteran teachers.
I wonder if the district or other districts throughout the United States are keeping track of, okay, we implemented this new evaluation system. Has that positively impacted student achievement?
That's a
Do you
good question.
Yeah, like if we're doing all this stuff, because I've seen what the teachers do. Like, man, that's a lot of stuff.
Right,
That's not even teaching stuff.
right.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it is teaching stuff, but it's not. Because one of the things that frustrated me when I was an assistant principal was that teachers and educators are required to do so much stuff that's not teaching. And that frustrates them. So how do schools turn that around to better help the teachers to become just better teachers so we can increase the student achievement?
I think that's a good question, and I think that is something that you leave up to the school board members because they can prioritize their issues. Now, I personally think that instead of having me stand outside and open the door to load cars in the afternoon, which I do, you want me looking at my students' data and seeing how I can improve and pull kids for different help for interventions so that I
Well, they
can get
have
them
to
to where they
because
need
then
to
you
be.
get into a safety reason. But then maybe you
But
bring in
there are
security.
paraprofessionals that can
Okay.
do that. And so that's, again, where you start to decide how you want to use your instructional leaders and your instructional teachers at the school. So you brought it up and said there are a lot of things we have to do.
Yeah.
Collect lunch money, 52 cents in a Ziploc bag in the morning. That takes away from instructional time. And if we can start looking at taking some of those things off the plate, then add things to the plate. But I think a lot of teachers believe we put more on our plate and don't take anything off.
Right. Now, tell me something good about the evaluation system. I'm not saying that you
No,
said anything
okay,
bad.
it's great.
We've had
Okay.
a bunch of.
There are
tell
some
me-
good things.
Okay, let's get to it.
I think some of the good things are in how we approach the students in their learning. We have them do a lot of the reflection, the Common Core, that is a new way of doing things, and I know the parents get upset. Have children look at different ways they come to the answer.
Right.
When you and I went to school, it was like, get the right answer and let's move on. Nowadays, they take a test and there might be 2 or 3 choices for how to get to that answer, and it frustrates parents who grew up like we did with one particular answer. But it gets students to do some critical thinking and reflect on their learning. So I think we need to move away from so much of the stress about grades to how am I improving, how am I growing? Just like the teacher evaluation system. Let's not focus on these numbers. Let's focus on how I'm improving as a teacher, how I'm reflecting on what I'm learning as a teacher. We think we need to do that with our students too, because they're at various different levels.
Right.
Various different levels, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Right, and just because they can't pass that FSA,
Right.
it doesn't mean that they don't have any value.
Right.
Or they're not going to be anything.
Right.
And I think we've taken testing and we've done this to people. Oh, I didn't do well on the FSA, I'm not going to be anything in life. Well, you shouldn't be making kids feel like that.
Right. There's a little cartoon I see that says, you ask a fish to climb a tree. That's the test for everybody. Everybody has to climb the tree. The monkey's going to do well, but the fish is not going to do well because we have a one-size-fits-all test for everybody. It's not how everybody fits into our world.
Right, and also teachers or educators, you guys will repackage stuff, right? So I hear this term deliberate practice a lot. What is that? What is that?
Actually, the deliberate practice is a good piece of the evaluation system.
Okay.
It's where a teacher can choose something that they want to learn more about and identify that and collect data. For example, if you don't feel like your technology is up to par, you can take a course using how to assess the data, how to put together a spreadsheet with your student data. And if you identify that as the one particular area you want to work in, you can work on that. This year, I have chosen to do reflection logs with my students. And so I ask them how they think they've improved. And they do a reflection log where they take their goal and they break down their goals, and then they reflect at the end of the week on how they think they've improved. Because they go home and a parent says, you got a D, you're on restriction. And they don't really understand.
Right.
And yet they've grown, they've improved on so many things. I want to focus on reflecting on the positives of what you've learned instead of the grade, which doesn't really give the true picture.
Right, it doesn't, because there have been a lot of college dropouts who are now billionaires.
Right.
And or people who didn't, particularly score well on a test,
Right.
but they had good sound business acumen.
Right.
So how do we eventually get there? Because sometimes I look at our schools and they do look like factories, everybody marching in lockstep, not a whole bunch of creativity going on. Like, for example, no one's gonna, you need to be able to write, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this, algebra, right? If I want to be a broadcast journalist, why are you making me take geometry?
You know, this is the question that all algebra teachers get asked all the time is, do I really need this algebra? So I would like to defer to an algebra teacher to answer that question because I ask the same question too. But I know a good algebra teacher who will give you a great answer for that is it does help you in life. It may not be that you're using the specific algebra tools, but it relates to other things. And I can't explain it very well, but I can give you the name of it.
I think we're too locked into tradition. I mean, even the school year is built on an agrarian society, right?
Yes.
When you used to have these big families, you need to be all.
Yeah, I think we need to look at expanding the school year, but I know that there are a lot of families that don't want to do that because of the family time.
Yeah, because now it's kind of set up around people's jobs and all this stuff. But you know what? A lot of people get negatively impacted by what's going on in education because it's not a good fit. But there are a lot of choices now.
I think a good model that I have looked at is to have a 4-day school week where you go 8 to 5. And then on Fridays, students would take courses of their interest. Like if you want to take Japanese, you want to take computer skills, coding, then you start to channel kids into their interests on Friday.
Right.
And you could have, you know, the academics done Monday through Friday if you went to 8 to 5 school
Why don't
days.
you propose that?
Well, because the busing schedule determines our schedule everywhere.
Yeah, but could they still have the same busing schedule, but just have that day just dedicated for that? Because corporations do that. They call it skunk work projects.
Really?
Like Google and Apple and all those guys, they give the employees a little time to say, hey, go and work on some new creative thing. And there actually been some things that have good business ideas.
I'd like to ask students, what do you think? Would that be a model that you would like, that you had your Monday through Thursday academics, and then Friday was sort of a course that you had a chance to sort of take, like your elective courses that you get, you know, if you really wanted to
And you
work
can
in art.
involve corporations, like maybe
Yeah.
corporations, like let's say you
Like the
wanted
culinary
to.
school, if you wanted to learn to cook.
Culinary, if you want to be a business executive,
Yeah.
if you want to be a finance. You know what, maybe we started something.
Well, there's a lot of stuff online that students do, and so maybe that's the idea too. I mean, they're doing a lot of training for teachers with modules online. Maybe that's something students are doing since they are getting computers in Orange County for most of the students. It's another option.
Yeah, what is it? It's all the high schools have computers now.
They
right?
do all have they all have computers.
Wow, I don't know.
That's
about
a whole
that.
nother story.
Yeah,
We
that's
can
a
talk
whole
about
nother
that a whole
story.
nother-
Right, and you're welcome to come here
Okay.
anytime because.
I've experienced a digital school, so I could share that with you.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. We got
Okay.
a couple minutes left. Now, I'm a big believer in technology, but in most cases, do the kids have better technology at home than the schools?
No, actually, a lot of them don't have internet access.
Really?
Wow. That's something we need to look at, is providing more internet access to a lot of our students.
Yeah, it's kind of a crime in the United States that everyone just doesn't have
Right.
internet access. Again, for money reasons.
So
That's
when
so
we send
frustrating.
kids home and say, will you do iReady lessons online, which target some of their particular reading skills.
You got to tell the people
there's
what
some-
iReady is, not even.
iReady is a test we give students in school. It's a big program that they bought that after they take it, it targets where their particular holes are. I call it the
Right.
Swiss cheese. So if you need to work on cause and effect, it'll give you a computerized lesson on cause and effect. And so that sometimes helps back up the teacher on some of the skills that they're missing. So those lessons are put into that student's bundle and then they work on them. So students can get caught up at home using that programming, but if they don't
But you
have the
need the
internet,
internet.
they can't do it. And the only time to do it is at school.
Oh, really?
Right.
So,
So a lot of those digital assignments you can't do at home.
but are you guys mandated to say we can assign kids
Yes.
iReady stuff? Because
Right.
we don't know whether or not.
But you asked me as far as implementing a digital curriculum into our school system, you know, you don't give teachers their teacher books anymore, and sometimes the licenses run out, and you know, sometimes the computer breaks down, you know, that happens, and you go to find a textbook and there's nothing to be found.
Yeah.
So they have to look on with somebody else. So there's a lot of issues that need to be looked at as we roll this out. But
Thank
that'll
you
be
so
another,
much, Diana. And
another-
you are welcome here every time. We're going to solve these problems, right? Evaluations, all that. Hey, folks, thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Hola Florida! Introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light Beers. Enjoy responsibly.